Welcome to KSAT's Common Grounds, a show about topics affecting South Texas. We're here at Gold off of South Flores for some great coffee and what we think some great conversation.
And today's is going to center around school vouchers. It's a topic that is ground zero in one South Texas district in particular. Incumbent John Kuempel is against school vouchers. His challenger, Alan Schoolcraft, funded by Greg Abbott and others, is for school vouchers. Here's both candidates laying out their case. When did school vouchers become a litmus test for whether you're actually a conservative or not? And is it a litmus test? I mean, how would have you believe that?
Yeah, it seems, you know, it's some kind of cleanse, a litmus test, as you put it. You know, the 7 full sessions that I've served, I've been here 8, but the 7 full I've served, it's been routinely defeated by 125, 130 votes as an amendment in the budget. And until this time, this past session, you know, it was the #1 issue. Why they chose, or you know, different folks chose to make it the #1 issue was beyond me, and I'm not going to speculate. But as I've done in the past, I voted against it, and as I'll continue in the going forward to, I wouldn't say vote against it, but certainly, because believe me, I want parents to have choice where they send their children, as they do today. But we've got to put the children first to make sure that all the children have the same advantages, the same benefits, the same opportunities, and they're all fair.
Yeah.
Whether you're in Fort Stockton, Texas, Nixon, Texas, Seguin, Texas, we've got to be fair and equitable for every child in every community.
I have believed in school choice since I was in the legislature. I was on the Public Education Committee even back then, and we were back then talking about school choice and charter schools as an alternative, the idea of trying to offer different educational settings for children. I mean, they don't all learn the same way, they don't all do the best under the same setting, so the idea is to provide different settings for different learning styles, on top of the idea of having competition. I'm a very strong believer in competition. I know that competition always makes the competitors better. I mean, I'm a businessman. I would love to have a monopoly, but I know that as I'm competing for customers, it's making me constantly look for ways to make a better product and a better service at a lower cost. I believe the same applies to education.
Did you ever think, though, you would become the target of a Republican governor who you've largely supported in everything that he's asked for, a Republican lieutenant governor, and a Republican attorney general?
You know, the one thing I have learned, Steve, is always expect the unexpected. The only thing certain is that certainty is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And it's just how it is this time, and that's fine. So I'm supporting a system that, you know, we can see from other states and that just doesn't work. Just from a basic economic standpoint, the cost of it would be debilitating for my communities, my schools, our local economies, and I'm just not going to stand for it and watch it go.
Yeah, you wouldn't change a thing voting-wise, knowing what you know now
No,
and how you become a target. Would you have changed any vote that you had?
You know, sitting here today, what I've gone through, if that vote were in front of me right now, I'd take the same exact vote.
Do you see it as anti-public education has kind of been how it's been couched by some of the other
the opponents of school choice frame it as you can either be for school choice or you can be for public education, you know, but I totally disagree with that. I am for education. I am for the students. I believe that public education has a very important role for that, and I think they provide services and settings that probably most students will thrive in or can thrive in if it's done well. So I totally support public education, and I do not believe that supporting school choice as an option in any way will hurt public education.
You keep saying school choice. Are you sensitive to the word voucher? When people call it a voucher program, do you think that's an accurate description?
The only reason I say school choice, and because vouchers connotate something like it's a one-time, you just hand over a voucher and have your education. But the proposal that was being debated and that the governor pushed last time wasn't for vouchers, it was for education savings accounts. And those work very similar to a health savings account in that money is deposited into an account and then dispersed from that account on a quarterly system. So it's just a different concept. I'm just trying to be more accurate when I talk about it.
Welcome back to Gold. I think we're all properly caffeinated right now, and so I want to introduce you to the panel that we have for this week's Common Ground. Marisa Bono joins us, the CEO of Every Texan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Demonte Alexander, consultant, always part of the power panel. Appreciate you being here. You can't hide. I know you want to. And then Eddie Alarete, who's a consultant and also has his own podcast, Beyond the Bite. Eddie, thank you for being with us.
Delighted to be here.
So we want to start off, we just got done with the interview with Kuempel Schoolcraft, talking about school vouchers. What's at stake when it comes to school vouchers? And Marisa, I'll start with you.
So a lot of ways to answer that question, but I think the biggest thing at stake is a lost opportunity. We have about 5.5 million students in our public school system. About half of them are graduating not prepared for college and career by the state's own standards. This is a systemic problem. It needs a systemic solution. And at the end of the day, vouchers, which are subsidies for private school tuition, can only help at most 25,000 students a year. And so the more we focus on these smaller, more insular programs, the more we lose in terms of opportunities to fix our schools. We've seen mass school closures and mass budget deficits across the state. We're in crisis, and we need to move in crisis mode and not be wasting our time on the sidelines.
Yeah. Demonte?
No, I totally agree with everything that she laid out there. I think, and a lot of times I don't dibble and dabble on the other side of this stuff, but I think when you look at what choice means and who it means, who choice is for, sometimes when you're in poor, broken down communities with failing like a school, like having a choice to go to a different school is appealing, right? Taking you out of that maybe gang-infested neighborhood and just failing school and putting you somewhere that you can actually thrive and achieve. But I totally agree with my colleague Marisa here as far as there's other things that we should prioritize in terms of the way we fund and the way we support our kids and educate the system.
How about you, Eddie?
I think there's a lot to take into consideration that most people haven't thought about. My father was one of 11 children. My mother was one of 11 children. I'm one of 5. My wife is one of 5, and we have 3. And today, 3 is above the norm. So we're not producing enough children in this country to replace the current population. So the future of the state and the future of the country has to be, we have to take a look at who's coming up through the public education system, who's coming through the school pipelines, and that's how our system needs to be built. I think that our former state demographer, Dr. Steve Murdoch, in 2012 said that the future of Texas and the workforce was going to be the Hispanic population predominantly, and they have a lower college attainment rate and a higher high school dropout rate. And he said if the legislature doesn't do something and start paying attention to this issue, for the first time in Texas history, we're going to produce a generation of Texans that are less educated and less wealthy than their parents. And that has economic catastrophic consequences.
And Demonte, to your point about choice, and those in favor of the school voucher idea, that's at the root of this. You know, improving education for people who may not have opportunities in their local public school system. That is part of what they support. But do you see a plan in which the state can publicly fund a private education and increase, you know, the education level, not to the detriment of others who are staying within the public school system?
Well, I'll tackle that one because we have 3 children. One went the public school route and the other 2 went the Catholic school route. Not that our oldest didn't want to go to Catholic school, he did, but he wanted to do some extracurricular activities that weren't available at the Catholic school. So to your point, we would have harmed one of our children at the expense of the other 2, and that's not something I would want to do as a parent.
We also, just to kind of level set here, the state has a constitutional obligation to fund a fair system of public schools. That's in our Constitution, because our founders realized how important public education was to our state's well-being and also to our democracy. And so the obligation is to our public school system, not to the private school system. But I have to say, I completely understand the allure of that reasoning, choice, right? Everyone should have a choice to find the best setting for their kids. I think we probably here sitting at this table, we have the luxury of choice when it comes to private schools, so I certainly understand the allure. The problem is the students that concept leaves behind. And because vouchers are so targeted, and also private schools are the ones that really have the choice, because there's not guaranteed admission to private schools.
You can get a voucher, it doesn't mean that private school's going to take you.
Let's be honest, and for those of us who do have kids in private schools, it's sometimes almost like college admissions, applying to those schools and getting in, assuming that there's availability. And that's just the luxury we have here in San Antonio. For a lot of our rural schools, we did a study that showed that across the state, most rural areas do not have private school options. So, but how does this system help them? Again, it's a systemic issue. We're focused on the icing before we bake the cake.
Let's leave it there. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back on Common Grounds. Welcome back to Common Grounds here at Gold. We're continuing our conversation about the idea of school vouchers, a key issue in this primary runoff. And so I want to bring it back to what we know about school vouchers. There have already been other states that have implemented programs like this. Studies done on what the implications have been, what the effects have been. Marisa, what have we seen other states, the results of school vouchers be in those places?
In the decades and decades that Republicans and Democrats have worked together to fight off voucher systems in the states, other states have been passing their own programs. So we actually have a wealth of information about what these programs have done. We know the data tells us that voucher programs do not improve student achievement statewide. Vouchers primarily serve families who are already in private school, and we also know that voucher systems have prematurely forced school closures and school district consolidations because of the budget constraints that they create. In some states, the cost of these programs ballooned up to 1,000% more than what they initially projected. In Texas, our own legislative budget board estimates that it's going to cost $2.3 billion over 2 years. Meanwhile, we've all seen massive school closures across the state. We've witnessed that here in San Antonio, right here at home. Budget crisis after budget crisis across school districts across the state. And because our school funding is based on attendance, a voucher program means money is going to be coming out of our public school system.
And that dollar amount hasn't increased since 2019, before the pandemic, before, inflation skyrocketed.
When you adjust for inflation, our per pupil student funding has decreased over the past 10 years.
Do you think the average person realizes what's at stake in this election? Because let's make no mistake about it, vouchers are on the ballot.
We've effectively lost some level of representation because of the way the national politics is now local. So does it really matter what your local state representative thinks if the governor is opposition of that, right? And so do I think the regular voter, maybe the voter that's the last 4 out of 4, they're very active, they're very involved. They may know the difference, but coming with 250,000 voters, that's not that many. That's not enough. So
we've seen the Republican Party move to the right, especially in the primaries. Do you think that people realize that vouchers are on the ballot?
I think if you're politically engaged or involved, you probably are. If you're a parent with children in the school system, you probably are. Outside of that, I'm not sure if people have thought through what are the economic consequences, what are the community consequences, what are the workforce consequences to us completely changing our entire education system.
Look, even as someone as plugged in as I am, or maybe we are, we still have questions about what this really means and what the implications of that. So I can't imagine someone who's has 2 jobs or, has a whole family and is really not plugged in, this is all maybe a blur for them.
Yeah. Mauricio, I want to give you the last word here. How tight is the margin in the legislature between pro and anti-voucher?
It's a lot tighter now after the governor poured $12 million in raises against candidates who were openly opposed to vouchers in the last session. It is going to be a tough battle. And we are losing, I think, the battle of misinformation because so many people are desperate, and the allure in theory of a voucher system is so appealing to our democratic principles, to our values as parents, and our dedication to our communities. Without weighing in, I'm with the C3, without weighing in on the partisan side of things, I would just ask folks to consider what's best for the system as a whole, and if there's a problem here, what are we doing to address the real problem, and how are we holding our elected officials accountable to addressing the real problem?
Marisa, DeMonte, Eddie, appreciate your time.